So just to kind of start us off this morning, I wanted to do a quick experiment. And so I need someone, preferably a female, a volunteer. And okay, Jen, now Jen, but see, we know each other. So oh, you? What's your name?
Pam.
Pam. My mom's name is Pam. Come on up, Pam. Y'all give Pam a hand. Now, Pam, did we prepare this ahead of time? Did we rehearse this?
No, because
So-
I have no idea what we're
Okay.
doing.
So you're not the one. Where is she? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I've got
Pam? No.
I've got a deck of cards here. Now,
Okay.
now, you've heard of women's intuition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have it? I'm just,
It's really human intuition.
human intuition, yes, right? We're not teaching yet, okay, Pam? Come on.
Just my opinion.
Strict orders. You know, I'm not to teach anything about the principles until. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so we have. I have a deck of cards here, okay, and I'm going to give you two. This is to test your intuition. I'm going to give you two clues. There's a card that's turned over, okay, that's opposite from the rest of them, okay, and I'm going to give you two hints. One is that it's not an ace of spades. And it's not a queen of hearts. Now, the ace of spades is a common card that men will say, and the queen of hearts is a common card that women will say. So I don't want you to think I'm playing the averages on this, okay? And what we're doing is we're testing your intuition. So it's an instinct. It's if you overthink it, you'll mess it up, okay? And really, this is about you. This isn't about me. So if this doesn't work,
It's not the clubs either.
well, if it doesn't work, right? It's not the nine of clubs. If it doesn't work, it's not my fault. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? I'm just,
Or mine.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe. We'll see. Now, so without guessing, I want you to name the first card that pops in your mind. You got to just...
Three of clubs.
The three of clubs, okay? Now, you guys aren't going to believe this. Okay, I'm going to pull the cards out here. Whoops, my room card. I don't know how that got in there. Okay.
Don't lose that.
I was looking for it. Okay. So, there's one card turned over. The three of clubs. Ooh. Y'all give her a hand. Great job. I don't even know how it works. There's an intelligence, right? Okay. So glad to have you guys. It looks like we've got a good feeling going, so we're going to get started. Our first speaker this morning. Let me make a couple of housekeeping announcements real quick, so that you know. Or I won't go ahead and do it now, and then maybe I can repeat at the end so that it kind of gets etched in your brain. So the breakouts, if you're not in this room, you're going to take a right down this hallway, and it's the James Monroe room, not James Madison room. I think you'll see in the program. That's important. This room is actually the Jefferson. This is not the West Ballroom. This is Jefferson. So if you, it doesn't say West. It says Jefferson. So yeah. So that was. So if you see that and you think you need to go to another room, you're in the right place. Okay. And also, breakfast is at 7:30 in the morning, not 8. So if you remember that, so you can get here in time to get the fresh food in the morning. So if there's other things, I'll think about them at the end. Our first speaker this morning is Dave Nichols, and he is the director of the Center for Sustainable Change, and he's going to share a few words with you guys. One thing I want to say real quick before I bring him up, and I wanted to mention this yesterday, is that early on, I didn't introduce myself. That was what I was going to do. First off, my name is Jamie Sellers. They didn't just pull me up off the street. I was, yesterday when I got done, they were like, well, we don't even know who you are. And I was like, yeah, they just pulled me up off the street and said, hey, will you come and do some magic for the... So I live in Homewood, Alabama, and I have been teaching and learning about the principles for 17 years. Worked in a psychiatric hospital for about that same length of time. And then back in December, I got the position as a director of a residential treatment center for boys with who have been labeled severe emotional disturbances. So from ages 6 to 14, these boys are, we have 24 beds, 2 homes, and they've had severe emotional behavioral problems. And I love the fact that I have more control now over the training and over the programming. So I've started introducing the principles slowly but surely. There's an art and a finesse to that when you're in the system, but preach it, right? Preach it. Like, amen, amen. So that's my day job. Also, my brother and I have a private practice where we do training and consulting, and I also do magic shows for birthday parties 6 and up. Okay, sorry. The other thing, I have a daughter who's 6 and a son who's 19, and he goes to Auburn. Roll Tide, by the way. So that's a little bit about me, and so that way you guys know I am supposed to be here. Now, I wanted to say one more thing too, is that when I was reflecting on this event and thinking about community and about how this particular conference, really the essence and the theme is about community work, and about how early on in my learning of the principles and learning about what the impact the principles can have, it was the material and the stories related to Roger Mills' work that really impacted me. In fact, his book, Realizing Mental Health, was one of my favorite books, and if you haven't read it, I don't even know if you can get it now or what, but it's a classic, and it's just down to earth. And then, of course, the story of Modelo. And reading those stories and hearing his fearlessness and his, he just embodied the health, like seeing the health in people that you wouldn't normally see. And I met him in 2005 at a conference in Minnesota and got to meet him. But it was, one of those starstruck moments. I've been reading his book and here I am talking to him. But it's important to remember that, yes, Sid Banks, he discovered, and expressed the principles in a very common sense way that was impactful. But the work of Roger Mills in terms of bridging the gap into making it a real world change agent, that I think it's important to remember that. So, just a hand for Roger Mills and his work. So I love to go. I used to read those essays all the time from the Health Realization Institute at that point. So anyway, okay. So now, bridging that to Dave, who is the director of the Center for Sustainable Change. Y'all welcome Dave Nichols. He's going to have Jean Catherine hold his hand during. No, I'm kidding. She's also going to be speaking, but Dave wanted to share a few words first. And as you guys know, Jean Catherine Gray, who is the director of Divine Play, and like I said, she's just the moving train behind this whole operation. So y'all give them a hand. Thank you.
I was going to say that this is not just me. You get a twofer. This is the team, just the tip of the team that got you all here together. And we really appreciate everyone being here. This is fantastic. I'd like for everyone to take just a second and take a really deep breath in. And then let it out. Now, someone tell me what just happened. What just happened? Okay. Keep it. Yeah, seriously.
Peace. We took a deep breath in and took a deep breath out.
That's what happened. Did anyone see or think or feel anything else that happened?
Felt a little more presence.
Lots of peace.
Relaxed. I was going to say, slow down.
Reset.
Confirmation that one is leaving.
That's great. So everyone kind of saw a little something different just by taking a breath. One thing that happened, how many of you saw a tree this morning? Ooh. Must have been in a lot of places, right? When you breathed in, it was the tree that gave you that ability. Because when you breathed in the oxygen, you needed that to be alive. But you gave it back to the tree that needed it. And it gave it back to you. We all inextricably live in community. She's got some more questions.
Oh yeah, he's leaving me up here. Good morning. So one of the things I want to do is I just want Jen Lucas and Kathy Johnson to stand up, please. Jen Lucas and Kathy. So, and Kathy, you can. You know, it takes a lot of people to put together any event, no matter how small. And this is no small event, apparently, as I've learned over the year. And they were integral, right, to putting this together. They had skill sets that I don't have and Dave doesn't have. And one of the things I want you to know is I want you to know that we're all human on the committee. So it's not like we never had a fight. It's not like we never disagreed. It's not like we're just like these easygoing, it's always cool, right? So not like that. Yeah, at all. Dave and I are like, at all, let me tell you. But that's not because we're broken. That's not because we need deep therapy or something. It's because we're human. And we get an idea about something, and then we feel strongly about that idea. We attach that idea. We think that idea. We want that idea, right? It seems like it's our reality. That's the beauty of a system that is designed for you to have a human experience, for me to have a human experience. So we can be angry that that system exists, but we also could appreciate it, because without it, we wouldn't experience anything, right? We wouldn't experience each other. We wouldn't have these unique expressions. Now, I know all of you here have a unique expression of yourself, and I don't really have a sense of everybody, so I'd like to play a little game. It's kind of like a dating game, only I'm dating all of you. Awkward, very awkward. Can you play with me? Will you play? Thank you, that's very generous. So the first question is, how many of you are from Charlottesville? Just raise your hand if you're from Charlottesville. Oh, wow, okay. Raise it high, raise it high. Everybody look around, look at those Charlottesville people. So now, yeah. So now you know who to go to when you're hungry at lunchtime. They know where all the restaurants are downtown, okay? How many of you are from out of state? Just raise your hand if you're from out of state. Oh, wow. Thank you for coming. What a pleasure, right? How many of you are from out of the country? Just raise your hand if you're from out of the country. Oh, now you know who to go up to and get their numbers and find out who they are. That's amazing. Thank you for coming. How many of you have been teaching the principles for over 20 years? Just raise your hand if you've been teaching the principles for over 20 years. Okay, look at those people. Hold your hands high. Okay, go find them today. Thank you. How many of you have been teaching the principles for 5 years? Just raise your hand if you've been teaching for 5 years. Nice. Good. So you're getting a sense. How many people are just brand new, don't even know what the 3 principles are? Just raise your hand. You don't even know what they are. Why do they keep saying that? Raise your hand high. Good. Thank you for coming. So as you can see, there's a variety of people here from a variety of places. Oh, I do have one more question. How many people listen to Waking Up the Neuroscience of Awareness? Raise your hand. Oh, well, we could do better. We could do better. So that's a podcast, and you can get it. Oh, yeah, she's like, I listen to that. That's a podcast, just so you know, follow up after the conference, Waking Up the Neuroscience of Awareness, okay? So one of the things I want to convey to all of you before we go into our tracks, and this is really going to be a workshop experience where you have a smaller group, you have an opportunity to learn more, ask more questions. But the learning for the weekend is a little different than any other school you've done, because the learning is called insight-based learning. Now, what does that mean, insight-based learning? How is that different than other kinds of learning? Well, actually, ideally, that we would all be learning that way all over the world, right? That would be the ideal way to learn, because your brain is designed for new thought. Your brain, your structure in your brain is designed to give you something new. And your brain isn't just an organ, it's an energy system. It's an energy system embodied in this physical world. And it is interacting all the time with your body. You know, a lot of neuroscientists, they think that the brain is just like functional, and if we just figure out where consciousness lives in the brain, then somehow we're going to figure out the mechanism of consciousness. But the problem is that we're discovering every day in neuroscience that's not true. There's neurons in your esophagus, there's neurons in your stomach, there's neurons in your lower and upper intestines. So your body has a bi-directional conversation going on, even with just neurons, not even to mention all the other kinds of cells in your body, right? There's a bi-directional conversation going on all the time. And that conversation is going on at such a deep level. So much is happening, right? That we're not even aware. We actually think after, right? After it happens, we're like, well, I did that because, right? But in actuality, it's all happening, it's all live, it's all active, and we're not even aware it's happening. That's how powerful the system is. So what that means about learning about your mental health system this weekend, what it means about learning, is that we're not going to learn from a book. We're not going to learn from the expert. We're going to learn because we're going to listen, and we're going to reflect, and we're going to let the system give us some information we didn't have before. And it's a lot like riding a bicycle. How many of you ride bicycles? I'm just curious. How many of you have ever ridden a bicycle? Okay, good. You're all out there. So if you remember learning riding a bicycle, for most people, when they first got on the bicycle, they didn't know how to do it. It was confusing, it was awkward, it was uncomfortable. And then once you got the sense of how it worked, it wasn't like anyone could explain that to you, right? I couldn't say, okay, now you take your left leg and you go like this, take your right leg, you go like that. You wouldn't be able to bike that way. You had to get on it for yourself. And then once you had a sense of how gravity worked, then you started to make modifications. You tried to make changes. You started to glide into it. You started to flow, right? You started to trust it. And then you would wobble sometimes, but you wouldn't be like, oh no, I'm gonna fall, right? Because if you did that, what would you do? You'd fall, absolutely. What you would do is you would look for that feeling. What's the feeling? Where's that glide? Where's my relationship to gravity here? And you go back to it, right? So this weekend is really, I'm going to invite you this weekend, as you go into your workshops today, to look inside, reflect, open the door to, wow, I have an insight-based system. This system is designed to help me out. Wow, oh my gosh, that's super helpful. That's useful. And I'm going to find out about this system more this weekend, all weekend long. Does that make sense? How many people are willing to do that this weekend? Just willing to. Thank you. You're very generous. I appreciate it. Okay, so those are most of the questions I have. We would love to bring Mahima up because she has been flown from Nepal. And I have to tell you, I met Mahima because really Jen Lucas told me I had to. And she's pretty much the person who always tells me that. She's like, you have to meet this person. I'm actually kind of an introvert. I like to stay in my office. I work on my PhD. I'm like, well, people exist? Wow. Where are you guys all coming from, right? But Jen, she calls me and she's like, oh, no, you really have to talk to this person. And so Mahima and I set up an interview. The first time I ever talked to her was on my podcast. And she was very eloquent about what is this mental health system and why is it important? Why is it impactful? How is it helpful? And so we decided as a committee that we wanted her to come all the way from Nepal to share that with us here in this room today. So please give a warm welcome to Mahima Shrour.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep this kind of brief because I am keen for us all to get into our tracks because that's really your home for the next 2 days. And where I hope the bulk of our learning will happen and there will be more time for two-way. But I see that a couple of people raise their hands for what the hell are the principles. So I just want to maybe just give a very brief introduction, and hopefully there will be a lot more time in the tracks to explore them. Okay, so the principles for me are simply, they're a way of explaining the universality of human experience, right? If we go back to all wisdom traditions, there is this sense that we're all the same, right? But in the world, when I look out here, we don't look the same. If I look at our resumes, if I look at our personal history, we don't look the same, right? So this eternal question of, well, all people are the same and they're equal, yes, but like, what the hell, it sure doesn't look like that. And there isn't a practical, there isn't a link. It seems like there's spiritual understanding here and there's daily life over here, right? So this, for me, is an understanding that bridges that gap, right? It bridges that gap between what is kind of this formless, spiritual wisdom of all wisdom traditions and daily life. I have businesses to run. I have things I want to change in the world. I have stuff I want to do. I might have goals. I usually don't, but there might be people who have goals. There's stuff you want to get done in the world. So this is a way of bridging that gap, right? It reminds you that they're the same thing, that all of life is, it comes from the formless. You have thoughts, you have ideas, who knows where they come from. You have helpful thoughts that help you resolve issues in your life, and they show up in your life in the physical reality that you live in the present moment, right? So I was gonna begin the trauma track by kind of pointing people to this, but I'm gonna say it here because I think it might be helpful for everybody. There is a way in which our own lives feel very personal to us, right? Things that we go through, they seem like they're ours, like they seem personal, they have a lot of intensity, particularly if it's trauma or violence or injustice, it has a lot of intensity for us, right? And yet, they are universal human experiences, right? You and I come from very different contexts. I mean, I am the other side of the world from you. My interests, our policy concerns, what we want to change about the country, all of those things are radically different. And yet, in all corners of the world, people experience grief and loss and fear and violence and fear of violence. We feel all of those things. So the principles for me are an explanation of how do we feel all of those things? How is it that this human experience works at all, right? So yesterday I pointed to something when I said, well, there's life out here. We don't know about life at all. It looks like we know about life, but we really don't. We know about all the things we think about life, right? All my opinions about an issue, that's what I think the issue is. But the issue isn't that. I mean, the issue doesn't exist out there. I only know what I think about that, right? So all of life is an internal experience. It just looks external. It looks to me like when you yell at me, I get upset, right? But I have no way to experience the sensory input and it having any meaning to me without me thinking about that, right? Like some days I walk into work and people say, good morning, how are you? It doesn't even register. It's like morning, 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 I go to my desk, I start working. Some other mornings I come in, it's like morning, how are you? Oh my God, isn't it nice to work here? These people are so amazing. As I look around the room, I think, I can't believe I get to be the one who works with these people, right? Some days I walk in, morning, it's like, well, can people just leave me alone for like 40 minutes, right? So it's sensory data in itself has zero meaning to us at all. We think about things and we feel the results of our thinking, right? That's in essence. For me, that was a directional difference in the way that I understood life. I thought life worked like that way, like stuff comes to me and then I feel the results of that. I hadn't realized that all of those feelings are a function of internal processing. So yesterday, I spoke a little bit about the earthquake, right? And I said, this thing of what am I feeling? Am I feeling the ground shaking or am I feeling all of the what ifs in my head? It was also that moment that I had the sense that really, if it's true that the stuff I'm feeling there's no cord connecting it to the stuff that's happening out here, then really, in that moment, I could feel anything, right? Like some moments I would play with my niece. I completely forgot there was earthquakes going on. I was just playing with her. We were laughing, we were running around the garden. Later on, a couple of weeks later, we would sometimes watch a film, and I would forget. Now, the physical reality hadn't changed, right? But I would forget. It was as though it was not there. And some moments, no shaking, but shit scared, right? So there's all of these anomalies in that theory about life where we say life happens and we feel it. If you look in your own life and experience, you will see big holes in that theory, right? It doesn't quite add up. And so this is for me the invitation of this weekend, not for you to buy this story instead of the one that you have in your head right now, but for you to see for yourself and to learn what you will, right? Because I know we have some speakers and some of us say we're sharing or teaching, but really the only thing you can learn is stuff that you realize for yourself. So that's really what for me the invitation is of this weekend, which is yes, to listen to people, but really take that as an invitation to listen to yourself, right? Like Joseph Campbell has a line which says, every person must learn to recognize their own depths, right? And that's really what this is. I can't tell you how to do that. Nobody else can tell you. Well, I guess people can tell you, but it's not going to be true, because you're going to have to figure that out for yourself, right? What does it feel like for you to have a sense of inner listening? Because that's the only place the solutions for your life are going to turn up from. I don't come built with the solutions to your life, right? I come built to handle my life, and you come built to handle yours. So even though where there are some of us who are more experienced than others in this understanding, but really we're all on equal footing. We all experience life through whatever thinking we get in the moment, right? Sometimes it's intelligent, sometimes it's profoundly unhelpful. That is all of us, right? There is just a complete equality to that, right? There is potential for differences without judgment, right? Because when somebody else sees something so differently from me and I so disagree with them, we're both fooled. I mean, I might not admit it to myself that I'm fooled, but really I'm fooled, right? And that's really all of life. So when I say I had a fabulous day, I say, oh my God, my boyfriend's so amazing, fooled, right? So the whole gig, and I also want to make this distinction. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you're only fooled when you feel badly about yourself. All of life, there's one game in town. You think things, they look real, and you run with it. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not, but that's it. That is the only gig, right? So I want to encourage you to kind of take that instinct of like when you feel bad to kind of beat down on yourself because you're like, well, I'm just thinking that. Well, yeah, but you're thinking all the time, right? Even when you're really happy and having a great, you're thinking, and you're fooled by what you're thinking. It looks real, but you don't know, right? So I want to kind of encourage this perspective of more neutrality and universality. If you look to what is universal, you will learn things that are helpful to your personal life and your work and your passions. But because life and trauma and, I mean, our own lives feel so personal, we, in a way, don't get to zoom back and learn things because of the intensity of how we feel. So I want to encourage this movement backwards from this very personal view of life to a slightly further back view of, oh, what's life like for all people? And what does that tell me about what I'm going through right now? Right? So I want to kind of encourage this movement towards seeing the universal nature of the principles, because there's something profoundly helpful about that. And it will help you in your day-to-day life, in the most mundane aspects of your life. Okay? But that movement is helpful to go from personal to see what's true of all people and to start from there. So that's all I'm going to say for this morning. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, Mahima. That's great. I think we've really done our job at the end of this weekend. When you get done with your breakouts and you realize that they were all pretty much saying the same thing. Is it because the breakouts are about the implications, and really it's the understanding that allows for these implications. So whether it's an addiction or working with youth or in activism, it's the same message. And if we can get that message across, then the next conference we can just do. We don't have to do the breakouts because it's all about the principles. How are we on time? We're good? Are there any, just to wrap up this before we break, any questions about what Mahima said, or is there any like head scratchers that you just like to ask, or if you want to? Yeah, if. Oh yeah, we're good. Anything that, as a teacher, we say things and we get used to saying them, and sometimes we don't know how they translate or how they're being heard. So I'd be interested to know if there are any questions. Yes.
Jamie, I don't know if you're up for this, but although we've talked about the principles, saying principles a lot this morning, no one has said the principles.
Oh, sure.
And maybe you could at least just cover
Yes.
that, so we're all going into our breakouts with that.
That's
At least
right.
some unity around that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, definitely. I think that's great. So the terms that are used for the principles are mind, consciousness, and thought. Now, do your best not to get caught up in the actual words, but they're pointing to something that's true, that's invisible behind life. So thought is this ability that we have to create. It's this formless energy behind life that gives us the ability to have memories, expectations, beliefs. Everything that you do in your mind comes from thought. And it's thought with a capital T, okay? So your thoughts come from this ability, from this power of thought, okay? This power of thought. It's like gravity. You can't see gravity, but you can see the effects of gravity. And gravity never takes a break. Not like, gravity didn't apply to me. I'm going to go float over here in the corner. gravity is true for everybody. And so when we say principle, we're talking about something that's universal, as Mahima was saying. We're talking about something that you can't break down any further. So it's like the primary colors, you know. All the other colors are derived from those three, and I always get them wrong. So I'm not going to, so there's a red and green and, no, green. Yellow and blue make green. See, like I said, I always get them wrong. I think my daughter the other day said, she's 6, and said something about, did you know that those actually aren't the primary colors? And I think she's on YouTube all the time, and anyway, I'm not even going to go there. But when we talk about principles, we're talking about the elements. So in science, you know, at one point, they thought it was fire, air, water, and earth, right? And they didn't realize that you can break water up into smaller parts, okay? Now, in psychology, they've all had theories. There's always been theories throughout time. Theories of why people behave the way they do. And Sid came around and discovered that actually there are principles that explain how the human mind works. Now, we accept that in the physical world. We accept that we all breathe oxygen, and that if we get cut, we bleed, you know, if you're living, and our blood clots, and we have a digestive system. And so there are universal aspects of human physiology that doctors understand. But when it comes to psychology, there hasn't really been principles. It's all been theories. It's all been, I can't remember if it was, I think it was Mahima yesterday talking about studying variables, independent variables. And what the principles do is they provide a dependent variable, a variable that's true for everybody. So thought is this ability to think, and then consciousness is what gives your thinking life. It's what allows you to feel your thinking as if it's real. So when I did the magic trick with the card and you thought, okay, good, he put the card over there, and it was real to you, okay? Later during the break, my magic stuff's better close up, and so I can show you some other cool illusions that bring this to light, that you're always up against through your thinking feeling real. So if you're walking down the street and you got headphones on and you're distracted, it's a beautiful day, and a bus flies right by and misses you by this much, and you don't see it, and you don't hear it, but you feel it, and you go, wow, such a nice breeze today, okay? Now, in my reality, there's no bus, right? Now, I could be thinking that there's a bus coming and be freaked out. It's just like a person who's paranoid. They don't say, I think people are out to get me. They know it. So they're looking out the window. And if you try to convince them otherwise, you're out to get them, right? Okay. So it explains the extreme experience of life, and it also explains the mundane experience of life. You know, like for me, it was, I remember for a very long time, I thought I didn't like mayonnaise. I don't like mayonnaise, and I would order stuff without mayonnaise, and if I got something with mayonnaise, couldn't eat it. You can't ever scrape it off, you know that, right? And then one day I got curious. I said, well, what is it about mayonnaise? What is mayonnaise? Well, it's eggs and vinegar and oil. I like all three of those things. Why it didn't make any sense. So now, unfortunately for my gut, I don't mind mayonnaise. That's a mundane thing, but that's an example of the principles in action. Your preferences, what you like and dislike, all of that, all of life is coming from that. And then mind is the term that we use to point that there's got to be some kind of intelligence that's making all this whole thing work, right? We're not in charge of our digestive system. We're not in charge of when we fall asleep at night and how much rest we get. You know, it's like that old joke about, did you sleep? how'd you sleep last night? I think it was Stephen Wright. He said, not so good. I made a few mistakes. You know, it's like that. You don't get to decide. There's an intelligence behind life that gives us creativity, that gives us insight, new thought, as Jean Catherine was saying, that ability to see things in a new way. And it's natural. So you see young kids, 2 and 3, you know, we don't have psych units for 2-year-olds. There's a reason for that. Because they get mad and they get over it. They get sad, they don't get depressed. They get scared, but they don't get overwhelmed with anxiety. They move on. And then over time, they start believing in their thinking and they start getting tricked by it more and more. So that's the principles in a nutshell. It's not a way of thinking. We're not advocating that you think positive. That's extremely important. Have you noticed trying to think positive never works? Because you kind of know you're full of it deep down. You're like, I'll just pretend like I like my job, but you really don't. But what happens is that when you do feel better, your job looks differently to you, and you have a different job. Your world changes. When your inside changes, your outside looks differently. Trying to fix your outside to feel better inside is the trick of life. And that's what we're trying to teach other people. So that's the principles. Any questions about that? I don't want to overtalk my time here. Yes, you have a question? Oh. I would get up and hug you so you could talk in my mic, but.
Just want to make sure I heard that right. So the last statement you made, you're fixing your inside to change how you look at the outside? Is that, or did I?
No. Well, you heard half of it. Okay? So if you think that you're up against the outside, if you think that's the cause, okay? If I think that Dave is making me angry, then it's going to make sense to me. My options are not that many, but one option is to lash out at him or try to change him. So I could be aggressive or fight him. I could use I statements. You know, I feel angry when you I feel angry when you sit on the front row and, you know, and look at me, right? Or I could try to avoid him. You know, you got to surround yourself with positivity. You hear that one? Avoid negative. I'm going to hang out with some positive people and stay away from the negative, okay? Now, that's one option, is to try to avoid or change him. The other option is to try to cope better. Okay, so I'm going to take deep breaths, and I'm going to be grounded and centered, and I'm going to try to think of the good parts of Dave and not the bad parts, and you know, and that is again, the source of my experience in my understanding is Dave. Okay, now it's not ultimately, but if I think that it's coming from him, those are my options. Now, when we talk about mind, we're saying that we're not fixing our inside. We don't get to choose that. You don't get to decide when you're going to have an insight. You don't get to say, well, you know, I think I'm going to wait until the drive home to have all of my stressful thinking, and I'm going to have a lot of insightful thinking while I'm here. I don't want to waste my time. You don't get to decide that. But there is an intelligence that you can have faith in, that when you do, if your starting point is that it's coming from you, you're less victimized by life. And you see the potential to feel okay even when it's not okay outside. Now, I've got bad news. Okay? So the good news is you can feel okay regardless. That's good news. The bad news is that there won't be a day that goes by, no matter how long you've been learning this, that you won't get tricked, that you won't start to attribute your feelings outside of yourself. So I get anxious because I'm like, I'm about to be in front of everybody and I don't know what they want me to say, and I may say something offensive and I need to make sure I don't, okay? And now all of a sudden, I'm thinking that my feelings are coming from not knowing something. Does that make sense? When it's still just, I mean, again, 17 years I've been learning this, and every single day I get tricked. And Sid Banks got tricked by his thinking before he passed. There's not a day that goes by. So I made that mistake early on. I set the bar really high, and I'm going to be present all the time, and I'm going to understand the principles, and I'm going to, and it just doesn't work that way. What else can I say? It doesn't work that way. So I hope that answered you. So we're not fixing the inside. It's not on us. Any other comments, questions?
I didn't get to go to the gym today, so.
So, Jamie, I really, I loved what you said. I just want to add one little thing, which is it's not really needed to be fixed, because it's not broken. And you've been pointing to that with your beautiful talk about the populations that you work with, and the very fact, all of us who've worked in the mental health field know that when people get quiet and they come into the present moment, the not brokenness comes to the surface again. And that's, so thinking about fixing ourselves is that's another trick of thought, because if we didn't try to fix it, it would be fine.
Yes. Well, and that's even worrying about mind fixing us, because you're right, that it is that we are already okay. And when I'm working on the unit, to be able to point that out, like, you guys are feeling okay, right? How do you feel? And they'll say, well, I feel fine. I said, you do realize that you can't leave here if you wanted to. Like, you remember, you're locked here. Remember, you've got court tomorrow. I mean, sometimes I'll mess with them about it, but it points out the fact that even being involuntarily committed to a hospital, that they are okay. Now, our job is to see that. If you see it, then the way you even look at them is different. You don't look at them as a project to fix. You look at them as they're okay, or you look at them as they're no different of a project than I am. We're all projects, Yes.
Add something.
Sure.
So if you're brand new to this conversation, there's a lot of thinking that can happen at this moment. And I know because I was brand new to this conversation once. And I really want you to know that there's nobody in this room who's not okay with that. So it might sound like this is a cult, but actually we're really interested in your individual understanding, your individual expression of your understanding of the development of that, of what that looks like. And so your questions and your concerns and your anger, it could be anything, right, is welcome here. Is everybody cool with that? Could you raise your hand if you're like, yeah, I'm cool with that. That's okay with me, okay? All right, thank you.
We want this to be a dialogue. We want this to be interactive. We want you to, I love yeah buts. I love those. I love it. Yeah, but what about this? What about that? If you have the spirit to understand, then, and even if it doesn't make sense when you leave here, it will at some point. It will kick in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? We have a few moments. We have one. Okay.
I don't really have a question. You just brought up the word cult. So I just have a little different perspective. How about cultivating lives? Cultivating the innate wisdom, cultivating our soul, and all of us together.
You guys down with that? Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. If it's a cult, I don't mind joining this one.
They're pretty happy people.
Yeah, exactly. There will be some Kool-Aid later, though, by the way.
Yes.
In the bar. No, I'm kidding.
for those who may be coming at understanding the three principles from a particular religious perspective, is where I came from when I learned them 25 years ago. Here's one way, and it's not the only way, but it's the way that has made most sense to me, and that is that mind might be equated to universal intelligence, or simplified saying God, and thought is our thoughts. And so God's thoughts versus our thoughts, one's going to be more real than the other. And then consciousness is simply being aware of the discrepancy between the two. And it's been my experience that the more my thoughts are equal to God's thoughts, the better I feel. It's almost like the warmer, cooler game, where if you, the warmer you feel, the more you're on track, and the cooler you feel, it's an internal guide that you're missing it. So anyway, if that helps.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It is important. Yeah, give them a round of applause. Thank you for sharing that. It is important to know that people from a great variety of backgrounds come into this conversation. So, I work with people who are Mormon. I've worked with people who are conservative Jewish. I work with people who are atheist, diehard atheists. So this is not a conversation that you have to have a certain religious perspective in order to engage in. And so I just invite you, wherever perspective you land, even if it's like, I don't know, I just like, I'm not going there. Like, it's all welcome, okay? Is it, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I of course, working and living in the Bible Belt, I was insecure about that early on. I grew up as a Christian. I tended to go to church, and I would get a little uncomfortable with some of the language. But what I found is that when speaking to a group of people, down in the deep South, I'll have one person come up to me and say, I love that you were talking about God. You were speaking to me about spiritual. And then I would have an atheist come up to me and say, I love how logical it is and how much it just makes sense. And so when you talk about principles, you're talking about before belief and before belief of nothing, so to speak. And it's because it's just true. And so whatever your persuasion is, it's like exercise. There's no, some people exercise playing basketball, and some people like to run, and some people do yoga. All of those are different exercises. Not one's better than the other. And the practice of your religion is it's the way that you exercise your connection to this intelligence. And so if you exercise by going to church and prayer, or if you exercise by worship and music, or going to a mosque, or whatever, the way that you worship is essentially allowing yourself to connect to God's thoughts, as I don't know his name, but that was a great point. Brian. Yes, Brian. So does that make sense? Okay. But again, please go to whoever, ask questions in the breaks, get to know people. If you feel more comfortable, like, okay, I'm really struggling with this, we really want to be of service to you. We want this to be a connecting event, not just people talking at you.
And I will give you a little perspective on the breaks. Some people will be like, how come there aren't more breaks? And some people will be like, why are there so many breaks? Right? Yeah. I paid money, I'm here to learn what's going on, okay? So this conversation is like roasting coffee. If you put it in the oven and you roast it a little too long, you know what happens to the coffee beans? They taste bad. Apparently, I don't actually drink coffee, but I hear they taste terrible. And so we don't want to roast the beans too long, right? You want to take them out just in time so there's this flavor that sets in. And that's what's happening. The space is where you have an opportunity for something new to arise, something occurs to you. And we don't want you to believe us. We want you to look for yourself, find out for yourself, see if it's true. And so the breaks allow for that. That means if you're one of those people who's like, how come there aren't more breaks? Then I encourage you to take care of yourself. Okay, take breaks if you need to.
That's all I have. Are you guys good?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Let's go to a break.
Yes.